Are now recording. Ken has been instrumental in helping PHP grow over the past many, many years. He's been involved as a board member, board chair, and I'll let him share a little bit more about his qualifications and how he might help support your family and give you information about financial planning. So Ken, I'm going to turn the screen over to you.
Okay.
Where are you? There you are. And you'll get a pop-up and you'll be seeing Ken's screen momentarily.
Okay.
We're so grateful that you're willing to do this and get this information during our lunchtime series. And I'm going to exit my face so that y'all can pay attention to what's really important today. All right, Ken, you're on.
Okay, and you can see my screen?
Can see your screen. Raise your hand if you can see the screen. Great, I see some hands going up. I'm going to clear that, so if you want to raise your hand later, you can. I'm also going to be logging the questions that you have for Ken. So as things pop up for you that he says you have a question about, go ahead and enter your question, and I will be recording that so that we can answer that at the end of the presentation. So I'm signing off and leaving you to Ken.
Thanks, Trudy. Appreciate it. So, well, first of all, thank you for people attending. This is kind of new for me. I've done webinars with individual clients and things like that, but never a webinar for a group of people. So, so this is kind of exciting. Most of the time, I do this presentation in front of a group of people, so it's a little bit different. So, feel free to ask questions. You know, that makes the presentation more interesting for everybody else and even for me as well. So we kind of start with the title, Navigating the Maze of Special Needs Planning for Families, that it's really more than just a special needs trust. We get a lot of clients that come in and they say, okay, we've done a special needs trust. Is that all we need to do? Well, that's really just a piece of the puzzle that we really want to take a look at. And then the background slide of just kind of it's a maze. You know where you're supposed to end up. You know it's kind of a torturous path to get there, and there's pitfalls along the way. So what we try and do is avoid some of those pitfalls so that not only your financial life can be successful, but also that you can leave a legacy so that your child's financials can be taken care of. So a little bit about disclosure. So I'm a certified financial planner. I am not an attorney. So when and if you come to see me, I do not draft the special needs trust or anything like that. We refer those out to attorneys that specialize in dealing special needs trusts. So like with anything, you want to deal with people that are specialists that know what they're doing in that particular area. Not every attorney can do a special needs trust. So we've weeded those out for you and worked with a handful of attorneys in the area to be able to do special needs trusts. Okay, so a little bit about me. So I'm a certified financial planner. There's a lot of people that call themselves financial planners. That doesn't mean they're certified financial planners. It's kind of like saying, okay, I'm a bookkeeper, or are you, a CPA, a certified public accountant. The next designation down is a chartered special needs consultant. There's only about 60 or 70 of us in the United States that have the CFP designation along with the chartered special needs consultant. It's something that's near and dear to my heart. So I have an adult child that has some mental health issues. So when we talk about going through an IEP or dealing with the special needs trust or trying to figure out trustees, I've been there doing that both personally and professionally. Local kid, grew up on the peninsula, lived as far north as Burlingame, as far south as San Jose. As Trudy mentioned, been involved with PHP for a long time now, so is between being on the board and board chair, about 9 years. And then with the on the typical financial planning side, because parents, even when they have a special needs child, may want to retire and do those types of things, the Estate Planning Council and the Financial Planning Association to deal with the typical financial planning needs that families have as well. Okay, as I mentioned, a chartered special needs consultant, it's additional college classes that we take after getting the certified financial planner to deal with special needs trust, government benefits, needs-based government benefits, limited conservatorships, retirement planning and risk management. So it's another level of education to deal with families that have special needs kids. Okay, so this is kind of the first slide of what we overly call a life care plan. And this is really where we take a look at all the different pieces of the puzzle that families have to deal with. And the first thing is really that they don't all fit nice together. So we have the quality of life, which is the foundation of everything, and everything kind of builds upon that. But we have whether health insurance, are they a regional center client? Do we need limited conservatorship? What's the difference between SSI and SSDI? Are we getting respite care? What are our out-of-pocket costs? Are there siblings involved? And you can see we've got a new one over in the corner, an ABLE account. So we will talk about that briefly. Trudy mentioned that Cal Able did do a presentation at PHP. So, we will fill in any gaps and any questions that you have on that, but it's a new tool. So just commenting about ABLE accounts, it's a piece of the puzzle. It's not a solution. Okay, so some of the common misconceptions about saying, oh, gee, do I really need a certified financial planner to do some of the things for the financial aspects? Well, studies such as Easter Seals, that they polled parents that have special needs children, and besides the initial diagnosis and medical ramifications of having a child with a developmental disability, their second biggest concern was the financial impact. How are we going to pay for all of this? So it's really important to realize that as parents, it's a major concern, and just avoiding it doesn't solve anything. So we have to come up with a plan, and it's never too early and it's never too late. And that doesn't mean, okay, just to delay until you're in your 70s and now you're adult child. You need to start getting things done at that point. Really, the earliest is better, and time is either your best friend or your worst enemy. So the earlier you start, it's very good for not only you, but for your adult children. One of the misconceptions that we have is that the government will take care of everything. So, gee, when people say, well, gee, won't my child qualify for some government benefits, or isn't there SSI, or what some of those things, or that can take care of healthcare? Yes, government services will cover some things, but not everything. And a lot of the government services are based on need. So they're what we call needs-based government programs. So that's the whole idea of that your child doesn't inherit things directly so that they qualify for government services. When we talk about special needs trusts, people have a misconception that, gee, I have to be rich to be able to have a trust. A trust is really only a document that eventually will be the quote owner of different things that could be for the benefit of your child. So it's really not that complicated. There's a lot of people that have a lot of different types of trusts, but it's really just talking to an attorney and getting those things done. I have many clients that the only thing that the trust quote owns is either their primary residence or a checking account or some sort of an investment account or something. It's not that sophisticated. Some people just say, well, gee, can't I just do a will? So we call them, sweetheart wills. That basically says, gee, if you're married, if something happens to me, my spouse gets everything, and then if something happens to the spouse, then that transfers over to the kids. Again, with special needs financial planning, your adult child, cannot inherit anything directly, or that could eliminate him or her from getting needs-based government programs. The final one is that siblings will provide the care. So again, I mentioned Easter Seals. They do a lot of sibling studies. There's a lot of ramifications of having siblings provide the care, even of being trustees or trust protectors. So it's really something to examine. A lot of times when you're doing the planning, the sibling that may eventually be a trustee is not an adult yet, so we want to deal with that. But it's also an issue of, will the siblings be able to provide care, and where are they going to be? We live in a very transient world where people are moving and changing jobs and going all over the place. So we really got to look at, okay, where is the siblings going to be? And will they be able to provide that care? We also have a fairly large population of people that maybe this is not their native country, so their support system may be someplace else. So we have to take a look at that. It's not uncommon for clients to come in and they say that they have no relatives, in the area. So again, that's another concern to say, okay, what do we need to do? But the bottom line is, a lot of people, they intuitively understand some of these things, they just don't know where to start. They just really are saying it's overwhelming, so they postpone. And that's really something that, if there's one thing that you get out of this webinar, is you got to start. It's not something that's going to, you're going to get done in a day, a week, a month, maybe even a year, but it's something to start working so that you have a plan, for your children. Okay, so this is kind of the heart of the presentation. So these are the 10 steps that we take a look at and say, what are we trying to accomplish? So the first one is address primary issues. So this really is where we say, when parents come in, what's the most important thing that we have to resolve now? So for some people, it may be medical issues. It may be that their child is turning 18, so how to qualify for SSI, or maybe they're going through an IEP, or maybe they're having, trying to get qualified for regional center, or in-home support services is coming out for an audit. Whatever those issues that need to be done now. So we certainly address those things of prioritizing what's the most important thing to do, currently. The second thing is really to take a look at, what is our life care plan vision? So what do we want our child's future to look like? So some common questions that we ask is, where do you see your son or daughter, if they're in special education, are they going to graduate? Are they going to age out of the IEP at 22? And what's their future look like after that? Will they be employable? Are they going to be dependent upon needs-based government programs? A big issue is, where are they going to live as an adult? So, they may be young and they're living at home, and that may be the, foreseeable future, but at some point they're going to have some sort of living arrangements. Okay. It's fairly common for parents to say, well, gee, and I use the term little Johnny just to make it generic, little Johnny will live with us forever. That's really not a plan. And it can create all sorts of headaches, down the road. So really, where is your child going to live? Will your child get married? Will they be employable? All of those different things, we kind of come up with what that vision is going to be. Third is really just try and find who's the future trustee and or conservator will be. So typically in a special needs trust, the parents are the initial trustees and eventual conservators. It's really the next generation that creates the issues. So when people come in and they say, gee, we're going to be the trustees, and then my brother or sister will be the future trustee, the issue with that is that your brother or sister is probably within fairly close in age to you. So if you die of old age, then probably your brother or sister is close as well. So it's really the next generation of who's going to be that trustee. And again, it may be a sibling, it may be another family member, whoever that is going to be. Sometimes it has to be a professional trustee, or that we utilize trustee services because you don't have the next generation set up yet. Also with conservatorship, if you're getting conservatorship and you have an adult child that eventually will become a a potential conservator, you may want to do it at the same time. It saves a lot of not only time, but money and expenses. So God forbid if something happens to you, that sibling can step right in and automatically be the conservator. The fourth thing is to identify financial resources. So what do you have and what will you have in the future? So most people have, we break it down into four main things that they have: possibly their house, their real estate, they have retirement accounts, they may have after-tax accounts like brokerage accounts, and they may have life insurance. So what are those resources going to be? Are there resources that are going to come into, when your parents pass away? Are there going to be some inheritances? So we identify those financial resources and say, okay, what are the ones that are going to be used to fund potentially a special needs trust? The fifth one, and this is really to take a look at what eventual costs do you have to support your child. So generally what we do is we come up with a dollar cost now in terms of what it would cost now to do that, and then we extrapolate that into the future, putting inflation and things on there of what that cost will be at some point in the future. And then we come up with, is there a way to fund that cost, either by putting money aside now, if you have the ability, or will your estate have that much when you pass away to be able to fund those future costs? Can we do that? Or do we need life insurance? That's the only really way to make sure that you're going to have that special needs trust funded with those appropriate resources. So this is the most difficult part to do it, because we really don't know what the costs are. We estimate and we try and figure out, is housing going to be part of those costs? The next one is prepare a letter of intent, and that's really where we take a look at what is your intent for your child when they're older. So as disabilities span, from being, high functioning autism or Asperger's to somebody who's completely nonverbal, independent, that letter of intent is really important for parents to be able to complete. What's your wishes and desires for your child? And so a lot of people focus on the medical issues related to what's important, but we also want some of the social things of what's important. It may be that for the child's birthday, you always take a trip, walk them across the Golden Gate Bridge, or it may be what works for a child in terms of calming down. Let's say with autism, that if the child gets agitated, what are some soothing mechanisms to calm them down? What are some things that will irritate a person? So we really want to give that future guardian kind of like the handbook of the child of what's important, not only for them or for you. You may have religious preferences. You may have discipline preferences. All of the different things that you want that you have in your brain and you have in your mind, but you haven't written down. So that's something that takes a bit of time to do. And when we tell parents, sometimes they say, well, gee, we sat down for an hour, we weren't able to get it done. Yeah, it's a multi meeting approach or whatever, that you and your spouse, you go out to Starbucks, you have a cup of coffee, and you just chip away at it all the time. And after, it's a living document, so things change. So medical issues may change, preferences may change, living arrangements may change, but you just want that to be updated as much as possible. The seventh step is really, okay, do we have wills? Do we have the other legal documents in place? So we certainly take a look at that. And in collaboration with that is, do you need a special needs trust? So let's explain a little bit about what a special needs trust is. So a special needs trust basically does two things, and we're talking about a third-party special needs trust. It's to protect government benefits and control of the assets. So let's go back a step. So there's two types of special needs trusts. One is a third-party special needs trust. That means that it's for the beneficiary of a person, but it's not their money. So most developmental disabilities, parents and things, it's a third-party special needs trust. You're funding the trust with your money for your child. A first-party special needs trust when it's the child's own money. So that generally comes around in two big examples of when the people don't do financial planning, and upon the passing, the parent's estate passes to the child who's special needs, and it has to go into a first-party special needs trust because the child inherited it directly. Or if it's a result of some sort of settlement, some sort of injury or something like that, that there's a settlement that's paid directly to the child. So a special needs trust takes the assets out of the child's name and puts it into an account so that it's not counted against them for needs-based government programs. So again, just to recap, third-party special needs trust is generally for people with developmental disabilities. It's generally funded by parents and or grandparents. It's for the beneficiary of the child so that they can qualify for needs-based government programs. The other thing that sometimes people forget, it's really about control of the assets. So you may have a high-functioning child with autism, Asperger's, that may be able to work and may be able to be financially independent. So, but the person also may be taken advantage of. So you want those assets to be for their benefit, but not where they have direct control of them. So again, it's for needs-based government programs and for control. Now, at the end of 2014, there was legislation done that was really sponsored by Autism Speaks, and parents were saying, I can put money away for my typical child's college education and have it grow tax deferred and have it pull it out tax free for college. Why can't I do that for my special needs child? So after many years, in the end of 2014, the ABLE account legislation was signed into law. It's a 529A account. And basically, you're allowed to put money away for the benefit of your child that would not count against them for resources and assets. So remember, so to get needs-based government programs, the asset level is very low. So it's only $2,000 for a single person. So, you know, so this is a way for you to be able to put $15,000 a year away for the benefit of your child in an account that they can have access to, but it does not count against them for the government programs. 9 is to hold a family meeting. So it's important for families to communicate. So not only with, let's say, grandparents who may want to directly fund something for their the grandchild, but for potential trustees, siblings, saying this is what we're doing and why. So there may be a case that if you have a typical child and a special needs child, that you may not want your estate to be divvied up 50-50. You may say, gee, with our special needs child, we want a bigger part of our estate to go to that person because they're going to need it, you know, for the rest of their lives. On the other hand, I've seen it where the person is severely disabled and, you know, and they've got the housing situation and the medical ramifications taken care of, and there's not a lot of expenses beyond the housing and medical issues. So we find out what is the parent's desires, what are those needs, and then we share that with the family so that the family understands this is what they're doing and why. You know, I always say err on providing a little too much information so that people know. You can do a lot of planning and get everything done, and if you don't let your parents know, and then they pass away and they directly, in their will or trust, give your disabled child money directly, that can mess up all the planning that you've done. So it's important for people to know exactly what you're trying to do. And finally, we know life changes for the good and for the bad. So we need to review that life care plan from time to time. So beneficiaries change, trustees change, all of those things, have an impact. So with change, with life or work or kids, family, those all things, do change. So take a few minutes every year, whatever, and review. Okay, do we got everything right? Do we have to make any changes? Okay, so hopefully you're not overwhelmed with all the 10 steps of saying, okay, gee, what do we need to do? But it's really, okay, how do you get started? The first thing is take a look at what the future is going to look like for your loved one. Where is the person going to live? Are they going to complete education? Are they going to be employed? What about medical care? So, with the Obamacare, that's, children can be on the parents' coverage through age 26. Who knows? I've been doing this presentation for many years. It's always a big question mark of saying, okay, what's going to happen with that? But right now, the children can. But it's really focusing on, what does the future look like for your child? Where are they going to live? Are they going to graduate from high school? Are they going to be employable? Secondly, trying to identify financial resources. So whether it's government benefits with, let's say, SSI or eventually SSDI, or is there going to be any family inheritances? Are family members going to be able to assist in anything? What assets do you have now? Is it all in retirement accounts, or do you have any other, after-tax vehicles and investment accounts? And do you have life insurance? And who are the beneficiaries of that? We often talk about when people sign up, let's say for their employer, and they put their spouse as the primary beneficiary of their life insurance. If they don't sit there and put who's going to be the secondary beneficiary, and you and your spouse die in a car accident, it's going to automatically go to the kids, and so that can be a big mistake. So you have to notify who those beneficiaries are and make sure that they're correct. So Trudy talked about the limited conservatorship and the upcoming webinar that they're going to have. That's a great tool. It's something to take a look at. What do we need to be in charge of some of the issues related to our adult child? So there's pros and cons of limited conservatorship, but just remember that if your child is a regional center client, that ultimate authority, once they're an adult, would fall to the regional center and not necessarily the parent, that your parental rights terminate at age 18 when that child is an adult. So you want to talk to an attorney or talk to somebody saying, gee, do we need to get limited conservatorship? There's other things besides limited conservatorship, representative payee, where they're getting their SSI check that it's going to be, you're going to be the representative payee. You can also get some things, whether, specific powers of attorney, healthcare representative, a durable power of attorney, all of the different things that if your child intellectually is capable of giving you those powers, that can be a way without going through full limited conservatorship. Sometimes just the verbiage can be important. So, instead of saying that it's a special needs trust, you can say it's a supplemental needs trust. I have a client right now who is an adult, has some difficulties, medical issues, and so she's getting better, thank God, but she has a hang up that her parents left her money in a special needs trust, and she just doesn't like that terminology of special needs. So we say, why don't we just call it a supplemental needs trust? And it may be a simple designation difference or whatever, but for some people, it does make a world of difference. Drafting a letter of intent. So really what we're trying to do is, communicate the desires and concerns to future caregivers. So not only you want to outline what your current situation is, but future situations. And again, the detail, if your child is able to verbally, has receptive language and is able to verbalize and what their hopes and dreams are and things, that makes it a little bit easier. But what if your child is nonverbal? You know your child better than anybody else. So sometimes you have to be able to put those things down for them. When you're looking at, do I need a special needs trust? Remember, it manages the resources and you have control. For lack of a better term and a crude term, it's just that you have control from the grave. So that when you pass away, that you know those funds are going to be going into a special needs trust and that you have put somebody in charge to be able to act for the best interest of your child. So it's a comforting thing knowing that your child will be taken care of for the rest of their life, that you've done the proper planning and set aside funds for them, that you don't have to worry about them. So it certainly protects government benefits. So sometimes, people are wealthy enough that they're not really worried about the SSI or SSDI payment, but certainly healthcare is a big concern. And then sometimes with group homes or different programs, if you're not a regional center client or you're not getting SSI or SSDI, you can't get in. Again, working with a client just recently that was disabled after age 26 as a result of a car accident. Very difficult to get into some programs that if the person was disabled earlier in life, that they could get into. So, there's sometimes there's qualifications for programs that we want to get into for our children. And then the special needs trust provides those supplementary funds. So it could be of anything, for some people, it may be the frosting on the cake for somebody that they're able to work, they're able to earn a decent living. And this is really just the frosting on the cake. Unfortunately, for a lot of people, it is the cake. That's the only thing they have that's going to keep them out of severe poverty. Lastly, check your beneficiary designations. So we move around a lot. It's not unusual for somebody to come in and they have 7 different old 401k accounts that they have, or they have different life insurance, and the old beneficiaries I've seen it where it's been ex-wives or ex-husbands, that it's been their mom or dad because they weren't married at the time when they opened up these accounts or got the life insurance. So it's always a good idea to check your beneficiary designations, because retirement accounts and life insurance policies will transfer by the beneficiary designation. It doesn't matter what's said in the living trust or the will or anything else. It's beneficiary designations. So it's always a good idea to do that. And it's a good idea to consolidate things so you don't have to go out to 7 different companies trying to change, what your old 401k beneficiary was. And it's always interesting when people come up and they go, God, I didn't realize my mom was the beneficiary of my old 401k. So, take a look at that and check that out. Okay, so if you are a trustee of a special needs trust, what are you responsible for? So first, you've got to know the beneficiary. You've got to communicate with the beneficiary. You have to act in their best interests. Certainly on the investing, if you're trying to do that on your own, you have a fiduciary standard. So we all hear about things that happen in the Hollywood or whatever, where some young child actor sues their parents because they wasted all of their money. It's the same thing with the special needs trust. You are going to be having to invest those trust assets as we call it the prudent man rule, and that you have a fiduciary. So it's important to realize that responsibility. You have to spend the trust money to meet the beneficiary's needs in a way that minimally interferes with their government benefits. So you just can't be willy-nilly of just spending the money for whatever reason that eventually could eliminate that person from getting their government benefits. That's, again, not in their best interests. You have to keep good records. So, and you will be required to prepare reports and things. by SSI or Medi-Cal or things, to make sure that you are acting in their best interests. And you will have to file trust tax returns, so you have to be aware of that. So again, this is important as parents. It doesn't matter how long the list is going to be, that's what we're going to do. But when you're thinking of choosing somebody to be a trustee, realize what you're asking them to do, and are they the best person to be able to do that. So it's common that we ask people, should they be a trustee, meaning that they're the ones actually doing the work of the trust? Should they be a trust protector, meaning that they're going to be like the CEO of the trust and make the big decisions, but they're not going to be dealing with the everyday dealings of the trust? Or are they going to be a care manager? And a care manager would be that they would identify what's in the best interest of the adult child, in terms of services, in terms of medical and things like that. So they're not going to be worried about the finances. They're going to see what's in the best interest of the child themselves. Okay, so we talked a little bit about the ABLE account. And so I just wanted to, again, go into that a little bit. So the contributions are not tax deductible. So you can give up to $15,000 a year on a calendar year basis. They're set up state by state. So again, CalAble just opened up this year. So the legislation was signed in 2014. So it took over 4 years to get CalAble up and running. So there's other states that are up and running, Ohio, Florida, just to name a few. Well over half of the states do have the CalAbles set up. Anybody can contribute, but you can only have one account. So a child can only have one ABLE account. Withdrawals for qualified expenses would be tax-free. It's quite a generous definition of what qualified expenses would be. And one of the things, you can use it as a flow through if you, let's say, want to help subsidize rent. So as long as the deposit for the rent goes in the same month and it's withdrawn to help the rent, that's going to be a qualified expense. So that's is a very good tool for people. Sometimes we also get where people get qualified for SSI and then they get 6 months of back pay from the SSI and they stick it in the child's checking account, and then 9 months later Social Security comes up and says, okay, you no longer qualify for SSI because you have too much money in assets. So this is a good way to, if you get back pay for some of the back benefits on the SSI, this is a great way to deposit those without just having to be on a spending spree to try and spend those funds down. Really, it's individual must be disabled prior to age 26. It's a self-reporting in terms of the disability. So sometimes we have, I've had people where they say, gee, well, I don't have a medical letter or something like that. What's the definition of disability? Again, it's fairly generous. It's more age-based than anything else. So be aware of that. You do have a maximum value that can be in the account of $475,000, but just realize that at $100,000, the SSI would be suspended, but Medi-Cal would never be affected. So it's not $100,000 of contributions; it's $100,000 in terms of account value. So again, it's something that we want to try and add that $15,000 per year. Again, it does not supplant a special needs trust. It's just a way for a individual to have some money to be able to spend on some things that really takes a lot of the hassle out of it, and where they would not be penalized in terms of having too many assets. So it doesn't matter what the value is, Medi-Cal will never be affected. So that's a very good provision. Some of the shortcomings. So when we talked about special needs trusts, we talked about third-party special needs trusts. So third-party special needs trust means, again, that it's somebody else's money that's funding the trust. And when that beneficiary passes away, that you have a remainder beneficiary on that trust. So it may go to, let's say, a typical child. So if you have a typical child and a special needs child, generally the special needs trust, the beneficiary would be the typical child. So if the special needs child passed away, that the money would go to the typical child. So the government never gets their hands on the money in terms of a third-party special needs trust. A first-party special needs trust, when it's the child's own money and you put it into a special needs trust, eventually there's a payback provision so that the government can come back and say, we spent so much money on little Johnny and we want to be paid back. So even if that's the case, it's still a good deal because you pay at Medi-Cal reimbursement rates and there was no inflation or interest paid on that. So it's still a good deal. But you basically don't want to overfund a first-party special needs trust if at all possible. So here's the rub with the ABLE account. The ABLE account in all 49 other states has the payback provision. California does not. So the federal legislation says that there is a payback provision for ABLE accounts. California, they've decided to go against what the federal government dictated and wrote the law saying that there is no payback provision. So it's not the first time that California and the federal government don't agree on something, but just be aware that, you know, that's how California is doing it. It hasn't been necessarily tried or in the courts yet, but right now there is no payback provision for a California ABLE account. So digressing a little bit, for college savings accounts, if you're a California resident, it really doesn't matter what state you're in. They all are treated the same. So you have the flexibility to choose wherever you want to go. For a 529A or ABLE account, it's recommended that you do use the California plan because right now there is no payback provision for the California ABLE account. So that's really important. So another shortcoming is that there's no lump sum provisions of an account, so you can only limit to $15,000 per year. Again, in a college savings account, there is that you can put lump sums in it and be able to fund that. Unfortunately, there is not with ABLE. We hope there is legislation trying to get that through. We're not sure if it's going to be successful or not. But you know, sometimes we have people that come in and they're working paycheck to paycheck, and they literally, their assets are a $50,000 life insurance policy that they have through their employer. And we'd love to have it where something like that could go into an ABLE account lump sum and not have to do that $15,000 per year. But again, that is not done yet. We hope that is done at some point in the future, but right now it's limited to $15,000. Okay, just briefly want to talk a little bit about some of the tax changes impacting special needs families. So this is the time of year that people are doing their taxes. So I have lots of clients that come in and say, great, that their taxes were lowered. And I have quite a few clients that come in and say, gee, my taxes went up, what happened? So the standard deduction went up considerably, almost doubled from $6,350 to $12,000. So that's a good thing. Personal exemptions were eliminated. So, you know, that's where they make up some of that. Child tax credit went up from $1,000 to $2,000. So that's good. This is the one that's hitting a lot of people, especially, you know, living here in the Bay Area, California, is state and local taxes. We call that SALT, state and local taxes, is capped at $10,000. So there's a lot of clients that, you know, where they used to write off significantly more in terms of what they were paying the state income taxes and their property taxes. New mortgage interest is capped at $750,000. It used to be $1 million, so it's capped at now $750,000. So if you buy a fixer-upper house, you know, for $1 million, you know, you can, and that's your loan, you can only write off the interest debt up to $750,000 worth of the loan debt. Okay. The medical expense was lowered from 10 to 7.5%. That was for 2 years only, for 2017 and 18. So it's back up to the 10%. Another one that's important is college savings accounts can be used for private elementary, high school up to $10,000 per year. So sometimes we get people where they say, my child is disabled, but I'm not, maybe they'll go to college, I'm not sure. What do we do? How can we save for that? Well, you can put it in an ABLE account. So education is a qualified expense under ABLE. So you can still put money away for education for your disabled child. Just do it via an ABLE account as opposed to a regular college savings account. Another provision of the ABLE account that some people are not aware of is that while there's a $15,000 contribution max for people, you can add, if your beneficiary, it has, let's say, a part-time job. So that's up to the poverty level, so they can contribute themselves up to $12,000. So now you've got $27,000 that you can possibly put into an ABLE account. So it's one of those little exceptions that some people are not aware of. From an estate tax, it basically doubled from 5.6 million each to 11.2 million each. So that's really a good thing for most people. So when we talk about estate planning, there's not going to be any taxable impact unless, as a married couple, that you're over $22 million. The one thing that we have to take a look at is trust income tax rate. So if you look at the screen there, you can see that under the new tax law, a married couple to be at 37% has to earn the adjusted gross income of over $600,000. So that's a good living. I don't think anybody's going to balk at that. However, if you have a special needs trust, that 37% tax bracket is any ordinary income over $12,500. So that's really important if you do have a special needs trust and it is funded, that you want to make sure that it's managed in a way that you're not getting ordinary income, because you could lose half of it to taxes, because 37%, that's just federal. We got the dear old California that taxes it as well. So it's really important to do that. So when we talk about taxes and things, we've got a couple more minutes. When we talk about funding a special needs trust, we talked about a little bit of that people generally have their house, they have retirement accounts, they have investment accounts, and they have life insurance. So when we take a look at that, when you pass away, that there's what we call a step up in basis, let's say for your primary residence. So if you bought your house for $500,000 and it's now worth $1.5 million, when you pass away, that $1.5 million is covered under that estate tax. So there's no taxes due. So if that house is sold to fund a special needs trust, all $1.5 million would go into the special needs trust tax-free. Same thing as if you had $1 million life insurance policy and you passed away and the trust was the beneficiary of that life insurance policy, that $1 million would go into the trust tax-free. If you had a retirement account, you have a 401k that has $1 million, you pass away, that goes into the special needs trust, that is taxable. So remember that with retirement accounts, you got a tax deduction of the money going in. It grew tax deferred. The government wants to tax it when you take it out. So there is no exception to that. So on your 401ks and IRAs, all of those funds are going to be taxed. The way to get around that is if you have a Roth. A Roth account, you do not get the tax deduction of the money going in. It grows tax deferred and it's paid out either to you or as a beneficiary as tax-free. So when we think about taxation, just really remember that you're going to be taxed at one point during the transaction. So if you get a tax deduction of the money going in, you're going to get a tax bill when it comes out. If you're taxed on the prior to the money going in, then it's going to be tax-free when you get it out. So generally, just take a look that at some point in the process, it's going to be taxed. And do you want it taxed at the beginning or do you want it taxed at the end? 401ks and IRAs are taxed at the end. So we want to be aware of that. If you do have an outside investment account, let's say where you have, stocks or anything like that, again, that qualifies for the step up in basis. So even though you only spent $10,000 on buying all of your Google stock and now it's worth $1 million, that $1 million would get transferred over into the special needs trust tax-free. So this is really where we start taking a look at that estate tax exemption. So as long as your total estate, again, as a married couple, is under the 22 million, you're going to get a step up in basis and all those things. So it's really important from estate planning to say what is going to be funding the special needs trust. So you may decide that your typical child will get the 401k proceeds and that maybe the special needs trust will get the proceeds, let's say, from a life insurance policy or from the sale of the house. Because again, those are going to transfer over to be tax-free, whereas the retirement accounts are going to be taxed. And you say, okay, I'm going to put that for the typical child, since they have the ability to pay that tax. And paying the tax is not going to possibly prohibit them from getting needs-based government programs. So remember, so when you have a retirement account that you inherit, there is what's called required minimum distributions. And with the income and limits and the asset limits of $2,000, many times those required minimum distributions would exceed that. And so you could be putting your government programs at risk because of having too much income. So you just got to be careful of what you're trying to accomplish. And then finally, really don't forget about cash flow analysis. So when we take a look at what you're doing, saying what you're trying to accomplish, if we're trying to come up with an account to be able to fund a special needs trust, is it something that we're going to do with, again, retirement accounts? Are we doing it with Roths? Are we going to have you switch that you're contributing to Roth accounts as opposed to tax deductible accounts, or setting aside monies? So we put these projections out so that when we have estimate of when you will pass away, that there will be enough assets to be able to fund the special needs trust. Generally, we want to delay funding the special needs trusts for as long as possible. Why? Because of those exorbitant tax rates. So we want to basically pay for out-of-pocket expenses through normal cash flow if we possibly can. And upon retirement or you passing away, is then we start taking a look at possibly, funding the special needs trust and getting an idea of exactly how much you'll need and what will be those expenses that trust can pay for. Finally, we take a look in terms of special needs trusts. We have to be realistic of the mortality of the individual. There's some disabilities that affect mortality, some disabilities do not affect mortality. So it's a difficult conversation to have, but we have to have that conversation and say, okay, realistically, what is the life expectancy of your child? What is the life expectancy of you? Because that's really the unknowns that we have to try and account for. Okay, Trudy, I think I'm a minute or two early, but.
All right, well, we do have a few questions, so I'm going to go through them. If anyone else has a question, you can raise your hand, and when we get through these, we'll come to you and you may ask your questions. I've got a couple of questions about the letter of intent. What is the general length of those? Is it many pages? Is it a book? Could it be 2 pages?
Yeah, so we have templates that we use that's probably 5 or 6 pages. But it's really, how much detail you want to go into. I mean, I've had clients that have been doctors and they spend everything on the medical issues and forgot about the social side. And then I've had other people that, just focus on the social. I kind of think back, for lack of a better analogy, of with my typical child, of the first time that my wife and I, we went away and my parents, babysat, and we wrote a list of what our child likes, what bedtime is, what stories to read, all the different things that we wanted to do. And it's really just a diary of just saying, what's in your child, what makes them happy, what makes them sad, what, the things that you know about your child that other people don't. But the big things are medical, the big things are social, and what's your hopes and desires for that. And then at the end of the day, you're going to be funding a special needs trust. What priorities do you want on those funds to be spent for?
Okay, it sounds like it's to enrich their quality of life.
Couldn't have said it better.
Yeah, okay. Some people consider using professional trustees or fiduciaries. Good Shepherd is one that we know of. What happens if that company goes out of business?
Yes. So using professional fiduciaries or trustees and things, that's a big issue with those type of organizations, because nobody is guaranteed to be in business forever. So, even with banks, so, the Good Shepherd Fund is a great organization. We've used them, in the past. Another organization, let's say Fremont Bank. So Fremont Bank has a great special needs trust department. They do a great job. On the downside, they're a local regional bank. And so would not be surprised if all of a sudden they were gobbled up by some bigger bank. And so instead of having a personal relationship and calling up, a person and they know your situation, they know your child and stuff, that you get a 1-800 we don't know you, type of customer service. So, it's important. So there is no guarantees on stuff. Just remember that those trust assets and stuff should be in some sort of a separate account, so that if the organization goes under, that they don't take your funds with them.
Okay, so you want to have the funding separate from the management of the funding. Is that what I'm hearing correctly?
Yes, if at all possible.
Okay, great. Another question was, when a person puts money into an ABLE account, let's say somebody is working and they're putting money into the ABLE account, is that counted as income for the account owner?
No.
Okay. And then another question about ABLE accounts. If a person is conserved and the individual really is not able to manage the money, why might one want an ABLE account and not just a special needs trust?
It's not one or the other. It's actually best to have both. So think of the ABLE account as for the day-to-day expenses that you may need. And that's, several of the states have, like ATM cards and cash cards, so that they can, purchase things, that you have a debit card. And so, if you need something, buy something from Amazon, you can go ahead and do that and have that as the account, where the special needs trust would be more long-term, planning and assets.
Okay. The other advantage that I know of with an ABLE account is you can actually help pay for living expenses like rent from an ABLE account and not have it affect the SSI. Because when you are helping somebody with food and shelter, when you're on SSI, you will get the reduction in SSI. But if you're doing it through an ABLE account, and ABLE means achieving a better life experience, it is not going to affect their SSI, which is one of the probably one of the best advantages of a special or of an ABLE account.
Yeah. So just to follow up on that. So on the housing, so yeah, it would not be counted as in-kind support, which is what dings you on the SSI. It just has to be done monthly,
Right.
of the monthly. So as Trudy, as you know, those funds have to be deposited and withdrawn in that same month, so it doesn't
Right.
count against it for
And
housing.
if anybody has more questions about that, the CalAble webinar that was recorded 2 weeks ago has really detailed information about that. Somebody also would like to know if the slides are available. Can you email them to me and I can email them to the people who attended?
Sure, Trudy, I'll do that for you.
Okay. I'm going to give anybody else with a question that they want to ask the opportunity to raise your hand. I will unmute you and you'll be able to ask Ken your question. I guess you covered it all. I don't see any hands going up.
I couldn't have done that good of a job. But,
so the letter of intent template, Ken, is it available to people who aren't your clients, or where could somebody get one of those?
So yeah, so the template I use is obviously for my clients or whatever, but you may be able to Google search something. Academy of Special Needs Planners has one that's on their website. I use a multitude of them because, you know, since they're kind of create your own documents, I get several examples of how some people like to check boxes, some people like to write. So it's really up to you of what's your preference.
Great. Well, I can't thank you enough for taking the time out today to spend with our families here at PHP and provide all this amazing information that really is going to make a difference for a lot of people. People are writing thank you in the comments right now. And yes, for those of you asking, the content will be available on our website next week under financial planning on our website e-learning page. And people are saying, yay, Ken, thank you so much. They're really appreciating your time and your knowledge and your experience in sharing with them today. So thank you. We're going to sign off now, and hopefully we'll do this again in the future, especially if something changes in the financial setting. All right, thanks, Ken. Thanks everybody for attending, and we'll see you soon. If you're not a PHP member, also when you go to our website, there is a donate button, and just like PBS, we're funded by people like you. Thanks for coming today.